Hello, my name is Martin Scanlan, and I'm a faculty member in Educational Leadership in the Lynch School of Education and Human Development at Boston College. I'm here today to share with you a few words about a research-practice partnership. Research-practice partnerships are partnerships between faculty and students at the university and practitioners in different areas of society to address problems of practice that the practitioners are bringing. So it's not driven by the researchers at the university, but rather it's driven by practitioners in the field. Research practice partnerships involve empathizing, envisioning, and enacting. And I want to talk to you about these three dimensions. I think they're important to understand research practice partnerships in general, and I think they're also important for us to think about during this time of the global pandemic, when we think about how can universities the faculty and the teachers and the staff and the students at universities be in partnership to advance change in the midst of a crisis. So first, empathizing. Empathizing means being in relationship with others. This particular research practice partnership involved empathizing with culturally and linguistically diverse populations. Now, there are different labels that these populations are given. If your mother tongue is not English, then you might be called an English learner, or you might be called someone with limited English proficiency. Those labels are accurate, but they also diminish a lot of the assets and the strengths that you bring. If we also think about you as an emergent bilingual, that helps us emphasize some of the strengths that you have as you're becoming bilingual. If we recognize you as the new mainstream, then we're seeing that you're a part of the growing population in the United States of youth that grow in families whose mother tongue isn't English. So empathizing, being in relationship with a population is key to a research practice partnership. Next, a research practice partnership involves envisioning a change. Now, the change that these schools were seeking was, how do we better serve this growing population in our schools? The particular schools that were involved here were Catholic schools. Catholic schools have a long history of serving immigrant populations, but in recent decades have not been very adept at being culturally and linguistically responsive to those populations. Envisioning that change meant thinking, what are the core dimensions of schooling that need to be in place to effectively serve culturally and linguistically diverse populations of students? There's three things that they need to do. They need to promote sociocultural integration, which means welcoming the students. They need to cultivate the language proficiency, both cultivate the English proficiency, but ideally also cultivate the home language as well. And of course, they need to support the academic growth, as all schools do. Those three components are part of envisioning what the schools wanted to achieve in the partnership. And finally, it means enacting. Enacting the change meant creating what would be a network of schools that were moving from monolingual English schools without those components of culturally and linguistically responsive schooling to two-way immersion bilingual schools. So the two-way immersion network of Catholic schools started in 2013 with a dozen schools and is now over 20 schools across the United States. There's implementation teams of principals and teachers and parents in those schools. There's mentors who work with those implementation teams, but they're outside coaches. And then there's a design team back at Boston College. And those three components work together to strategically network, to scaffold the change toward culturally and linguistically responsive schooling. This research practice partnership has involved exploring, how do we change the curriculum? How do we change the assessments? How do we change the school culture so that we are able to enact a new way of teaching and learning in the schools? It's developed over the last 7 years in some pretty interesting ways. One thing that we found was that initially Boston College was the hub and all communications came through that design team at the hub. But increasingly, the network has become more diffuse, with micro hubs developing and expertise more dispersed across the network. We've learned that the rituals of the Catholic schools, the integrating into the Mass and the prayer life of the school, is a really key component to how we can support the change in the broader culture. We've learned that the partnerships with families are essential in enacting a whole school reform. We've learned that new resources can be attracted into the school community, and a new vibrancy can be elevated in the school community when you start to enact this kind of change. And we've learned that the partnership with Boston College is a key lever in enacting that change. Research practice partnerships that involve first empathizing and then envisioning change and finally enacting change are important examples of how universities can work with practitioners in schools and in other community-based organizations to envision a new future and to enact that. And that's particularly important right now at this time of discombobulation in so many sectors of society. So I hope that this little example of one research practice partnership at Boston College is giving you some inspiration and hope during these days. Thanks.